Welcome. Today, we're embarking on a really fascinating journey, peeling back the layers of history to explore how European colonialism started to, take root in India.
Right.
We've gone through a stack of historical excerpts, and, well, I'm pretty eager to share some genuinely surprising insights with you.
Indeed. Have you ever wondered how these global powers began shaping the subcontinent? This deep dive should give a clear, concise overview,
Yeah.
highlighting the key players, their strategies, which definitely evolved, and the initial impact of their arrival.
So our mission today is to unpack the story of four major European powers. We've got the Portuguese, the British, the Dutch, and the French, and how they navigated what was an incredibly complex political landscape in India at the time. It's a story filled with, well, trade, ambition, and some often surprising negotiations.
Absolutely. Trade and power often intertwined.
Exactly. So let's get into it. 1, the Portuguese, trailblazers and sea masters. Okay, so our story really kicks off in 1498. That's Vasco da Gama, the Portuguese seafarer, reaching Calicut, or Kozhikode.
Right, the Malabar coast.
And what's striking, I think, is just how quickly the Portuguese established a significant presence. We're talking early 16th century, and they already controlled a pretty considerable portion of the Indian coast.
It was remarkably fast.
Yeah.
And what's truly insightful here is how they very cleverly capitalized on the existing, often strained, relations among the various South Indian rulers.
Ah, okay, so divide and conquer, almost.
In a way, yes. They didn't just show up. They strategically set up colonies and these fortified bases all along the western coast.
Yeah.
The sea became their lifeline, for protection and continuous supplies.
And their naval force, it was just leagues ahead at that point, wasn't it?
Completely unparalleled at the time. They could launch these sudden, devastating attacks from the sea.
Which must have been terrifying.
Absolutely. And the implications were profound because most Indian rulers, with the notable exception of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj much later on, they just didn't maintain significant naval forces. So they simply couldn't match these maritime tactics. There's a whole different kind of warfare they weren't really equipped for.
So how did they actually, enforce this control? It wasn't just about winning battles, was it?
No, that's a pivotal point. By establishing this really formidable presence in the Indian Ocean, they introduced something called the Cartaz system.
The Cartaz.
Yes. It wasn't just some optional license for ships to sail. It became obligatory.
Yeah.
Even for powerful rulers like the Mughals or the Southern Sultanates. They had to buy this Portuguese permit.
Or else
their vessels were seized or sunk. Simple as that. This document, the Cartaz, it detailed everything. The ship, the captain, the ports it could visit, even the weapons it was allowed for self-defense.
Wow, so total control over maritime movement, essentially.
Pretty much, in the areas they dominated.
So if you think about their reach by, say, 1608, what did that look like?
It was formidable. Extensive colonies, especially on the western coast. Goa was their capital, of course, including Sachti and Pardesh. But also Diu, Daman, Chaul, Honavar, Mangalore, Kochi. Oh, the list goes on.
And the eastern coast, too.
Yes, they had crucial trading posts there as well. Places like Nagpattinam, Mylapore, also called South Tome and Hooghly in Bengal. It shows they weren't just focused on one area. They had ambitions for coast-to-coast influence.
And they set up a proper administration?
Oh, yes. Quite sophisticated. Governed directly by the Portuguese king. You had a viceroy, the viceroy, and a capitani-geral, the general of the army.
Right.
Each serving a 3-year term, supported by an advisory board. This included figures like the Archbishop of Goa and a judge.
So church and state working together.
Very closely. And importantly, they even set up shipbuilding facilities in Goa, Diu, and Daman. They used the local teak wood, which was incredibly durable. This wasn't just about trade, you see. It was about establishing a real long-term self-sufficient presence.
But it wasn't just military and economic power, was it? I remember reading about their cultural policies.
No, it wasn't just forts and trade. They implemented very strict cultural policies in the areas they directly ruled. For instance, they prohibited building any religious monuments except churches.
Really? That's strict?
Yeah, and banned local religious festivals, even wedding functions. They actively tried to suppress local languages, too.
How?
Well, one way was offering employment as an incentive, basically, to convert to Christianity.
That's quite forceful.
It was. Interestingly, though, Goa was initially made a free port, which attracted traders from all over. But those stricter cultural policies did intensify over time.
So connecting this to the bigger picture, this dominance didn't last forever.
Right? No, despite its early strength, it eventually waned. Their intense focus on religious conversion and this sort of uncompromising approach alienated many local powers and people.
And competition.
Crucially, they were ultimately defeated in major sea battles by the Dutch and the British in the 17th century. Their naval supremacy was challenged and broken.
Okay, so that decline paved the way for others, too. The British. From trading posts to fortified factories. Right, so as Portuguese power started showing cracks, another player, maybe more, strategically patient perhaps, was making its moves. Let's pivot to the British. The East India Company, famous name, established December 31st, 1600. Queen Elizabeth gave the okay.
That's the one. And initially, their operations were strictly commercial. That was the idea. Anyway.
Just business.
Just business. Send cargo east, sell British goods, use the profits in cash to buy spices and other Indian commodities, then sail back and sell those in England for, well, huge returns.
You mentioned Vasco da Gama's first voyage profits earlier. 60 times the cost.
Exactly. And that staggering profit wasn't just a win for Portugal. It fundamentally shifted the global economic view. It proved that direct sea trade with Asia bypassed the old land routes and middlemen.
Which must have lit a fire under other European nations?
It ignited a fierce race. The British were definitely watching, learning, and planning.
But these voyages, they took forever, right? Sailboats, dependent on winds.
Incredibly long.
Yeah.
You needed specific wind patterns, monsoons, for the journey out and the journey back. This meant ships often had to stay in India for, say, 9 to 13 months between trips.
Which is impractical if you're just dropping off goods and picking stuff up.
Precisely. And that led to a crucial development.
Yeah.
The need for permanent bases. They called them factories.
Now, factories sounds like a place where things are made. But that's not quite right here, is it?
No, not in the modern sense. It was an emporium. Think of it as a large, self-contained compound, a place to buy, store, and sell goods.
Okay.
These were often extensive plots of land with secure warehouses, living quarters for the staff, offices, often flying the Union Jack.
And the staff were called factors.
Exactly. From the president, or chief factor, right down to the apprentices. They all lived and ate together in the factory mess. You can imagine the isolation, really. Thousands of miles from home, crammed into these secure compounds, all focused on trade.
So, starting commercial, but then things shifted. By 1623, the British government gave the company more power.
Significantly more. They were granted the right to punish their own staff if they stepped out of line, and crucially, a monopoly on trade in Eastern countries. This wasn't just commerce anymore.
Monopoly is a big step.
It is. And then King Charles II expanded their rights even further. They could build forts, maintain their own army, and even make treaties with non-Christian rulers.
Wow. So, beyond just trade now into, well, quasi-governmental powers, what does that signal?
That's a critical observation.
Yeah.
It signals a fundamental shift. They weren't just merchants anymore. They were becoming this hybrid, part trading company, part instrument of state power and geopolitical influence.
Where are their main bases initially?
In the latter half of the 17th century, they operated primarily from Surat on the west coast and Chennai, or Madras as it was known, on the east coast.
Right.
And the Surat center was quite important. It even controlled smaller factories as far away as Rajapur in Maharashtra, Mocha in Yemen, and Basra in the Persian Gulf. Shows their network was spreading.
And in Chennai, they built Fort St. George.
Yes, and a mint. They started issuing their own coinage, gold, silver, alloys, copper. Another sign of their growing autonomy.
But here's a quirky detail I found fascinating. 1661. Charles II gets the islands of Mumbai as a wedding gift.
It's true. When he married Catherine of Braganza, the Princess of Portugal, the islands were part of her dowry.
A royal wedding gift. But then he didn't keep it.
It's almost ironic, isn't it? The King of England found maintaining these islands too expensive, too much of a hassle.
Really?
Yeah. So in 1669, he basically leased Mumbai to the East India Company. He sort of outsourced his royal gift.
Smart move for the company, though.
Absolutely. It immediately encouraged merchants and artisans to settle there, protected by the company. Mumbai, which was originally 7 separate islands, Mumbai, Mahim, Peral, Wadala, Worli, Sion, and Mazgaon, became fully British, controlled by 1665.
Secured how?
The company secured it with just 5 or 6 small ships and about 300 soldiers. It was a practical, almost business-like expansion rather than some grand royal conquest at that stage. 3. The Dutch, an empire of trade.
Okay, so the British are establishing themselves, leasing Mumbai, but they weren't the only other major players stepping into the space left by the waning Portuguese. the Dutch arrived with a bang, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. While the British were still, finding their footing in some ways, the Dutch burst onto the scene. In 1602, several existing Dutch companies merged to form the United East India Company, the VOC.
And the Dutch government backed them heavily from the start.
Immense power right from the outset. Their charter wasn't just a license to trade, it was incredibly comprehensive.
That's so.
It explicitly authorized them to appoint their own staff, establish factories, build forts, engage in battles, and crucially sign treaties with Eastern countries on behalf of the Dutch state. They even appointed a governor-general specifically for Indian affairs.
So state-backed commercial empire building from day one.
Pretty much, yes. That was the model.
And their reach became enormous, didn't it?
By the mid-17th century, their empire was truly vast. It stretched all the way from the eastern coast of Africa around the Cape to Japan, encompassing regions like Mozambique, South Africa, Yemen, Iraq, Iran, parts of Pakistan and India, Bangladesh, and huge swaths of Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia. Their ambition was immense.
And like the Portuguese, they built fortified factories.
Yes, heavily fortified, often with cannons mounted on the walls. It was a clear signal. We're here to stay, and we'll protect our interests by force if necessary.
Did they operate differently from the Portuguese in other ways?
Well, one significant operational detail is that they readily employed native people in their staff, perhaps more integratedly than the early Portuguese. Their very first factory in India was set up in 1602 at Pettapulli on the northern Coromandel coast, an ancient port city known as Mosalia, going back centuries.
And they spread out from there.
Strategically, yes. Other factories popped up in key trading hubs, Machilipatnam, Pulicat, Tirupapuliyur, Port Nova, Karakal, but also important inland centers like Agra, Ahmedabad, Bharuch, Surat. They understood the need for both coastal and inland presence.
Did they get local permission for forts?
They did. They obtained permission from the fading Vijayanagar court to build forts in Pulicat and Nagapattan. This shows their diplomatic maneuvering alongside their military might.
And they took on the Portuguese directly?
Decisively. They defeated the Portuguese in several key battles and acquired their forts in places like Kochi, Kodungallur, Kannur, and Kollam. This was a major blow to Portuguese power in India.
What did that give them control over?
Critically, it helped them secure a monopoly, or near monopoly, in the black pepper trade, especially after signing a treaty with the King of Kochi.
And their military strength.
At the beginning of the 17th century, the Dutch Navy was incredibly strong, probably the strongest in the world at that point. They could deploy at least 20 warships and an army of 3,000 to 4,000 soldiers in the East Indies. They were a force to be reckoned with.
And did they adopt that Portuguese tactic, the license system?
They did, absolutely. Just like the Portuguese before them, they implemented their own permit system. Mughal, Adil Shahi, Qutub Shahi ships belonging to major Indian powers needed a Dutch permit to sail in certain waters or risk being seized.
So control of the seas remained paramount.
Paramount. It was the key to controlling trade. 4. The French, the final European rival.
Okay, Portuguese, British, Dutch. Finally, we come to the French. They seem to have entered the scene a bit later than the others.
Yes, comparatively late. The French East India Company, or La Compagnie des Indes Orientales, was established in 1664. This was largely thanks to Jean-Baptiste Colbert, who was King Louis XIV's very influential finance minister.
And did they get similar powers to the British and Dutch companies?
They did. The French crown granted them extensive authority, mirroring their rivals. They could trade with Eastern countries, maintain their own army and navy, wage war, or sign treaties with Eastern rulers.
And tax breaks.
And significant tax exemptions from their own government.
Yeah.
This was clearly another state-backed enterprise, signaling France's serious intent to become a major player in the East.
Where did they set up first?
Their first factory in India was established in Surat in 1668. Interestingly, they got permission directly from the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb.
Surat seems like a popular spot.
It's a major trading hub. Other French factories quickly followed in strategic locations. Pondicherry, which became very important for them, Chandranagar in Bengal, Mahe on the Malabar coast, Karakal, and Machilipatnam.
Pondicherry, or Puducherry today, that became their main base.
Exactly. It became their main operational center, the heart of their ambitions in India. And this is where the story gets really intricate and political.
How so?
The French didn't just stick to trade. They found themselves getting increasingly drawn into local Indian politics. They ended up fighting with the Qutub Shahi ruler of Golconda, clashing with the Dutch.
Okay.
And then, Critically, they intervened directly in a succession dispute within the family of the Nawab of Karnataka and the Carnatic region.
Ah, taking sides in local power struggles.
Precisely. This shift from focusing mainly on trade to direct political and military intervention was a real game changer. It fundamentally altered their relationship with Indian states and, crucially, with the British.
And this intervention, this is what led to the big clashes with the British.
Exactly. It led directly to a series of 3 major conflicts between the French and the British, fought largely on Indian soil. They're famously known as the Carnatic Wars.
When were these fought?
They spanned roughly from 1744 to 1763 CE. It was a period of intense rivalry.
And the outcome?
The Third Carnatic War proved utterly decisive. The British scored a major victory.
What did that mean for the French?
The defeat of the French in that final war effectively removed the last major European rival for the British in India. Their political ambitions were curtailed, though they kept a few small trading posts, like Pondicherry.
So this set the stage for British dominance.
It absolutely did. It cleared the path for the British East India Company's eventual, almost unhindered expansion across the subcontinent. It really marked a major turning point in Indian history. Outro.
So we've covered a lot of ground there. We've seen how the Portuguese, the British, the Dutch, and the French, each with their own strategies, strengths, and timings, carved out their initial footholds in India.
Yeah, from Vasco da Gama's incredibly lucrative first voyage.
Right, and the strategic importance of those fortified factories.
All the way to those fierce Carnatic Wars that ultimately decided the European power balance in India. It's a story of constantly shifting power dynamics and really intense competition.
This deep dive, I think, has shown us the ingenuity, but also often the ruthlessness with which these European powers operated.
Definitely. They sought to control trade and territory, leveraging their naval superiority, their strong state backing, and, crucially, exploiting the existing political divisions among Indian rulers.
They played the game very effectively, you could say.
To their immense advantage, yes.
It certainly paints a vivid picture of a really pivotal period in global history. You have these distant empires clashing right there on Indian soil and completely transforming the landscape forever.
It does. And thinking about all this, it raises an important question for us, maybe for you listening too, as we've seen how these European powers establish themselves, often quite forcefully. What forms of resistance might have emerged? We touched on Shivaji briefly, but more broadly.
Ah, right. From the Indian rulers, from the general populace. How did they react? How did they push back against this incoming New World Order?
Exactly. How did they resist this formidable foreign presence?
That's a really good question. Something for all of us to ponder, perhaps, until our next deep dive.
Food for thought.
Definitely. Well, thanks for joining us on this exploration today.